Oh, this computer's getting hot. Uh-oh. Oh, you. Ah! We're getting ready for a live broadcast. Yeah.
You can just go and make it.
Okay, but is it not showing? You hear it though, right? Oh, there we go. So you see yourself now?
Not yet.
Oh, maybe
it lags about 45 seconds. It's like,
oh, there you go. You come around the car. How is the audio? Test, test. Hi, my name's Ryan. Good to meet you. Marr.
Is it not showing? You hear it though, right? Oh, there we go. Maybe lags about 25 seconds. You can hear it. It'll only be a problem if we get a whole bunch of ambient noise.
Yeah. Does it not seem like it's focused here, which is weird? Do you see how that?
It just looks. It looks grainy.
But it's clear on yours, right? And it's reversed. Is that weird?
I don't think it was reversed on mine.
Yours, the Antrepreneur Center was forward on that one.
That's funny.
We are seeing it from the backside of the screen.
You're streaming live.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
It's so funny hearing our voices like 10 seconds later. Actually, yeah, let's do that. Or I'll call you right back on this number if you want. Okay, it'll be a couple minutes. Thanks. Bye.
Small victories.
Red lines?
Oh yeah. Yeah, we're at lunchtime snack pad. We're working on food sponsors actually. That's on the list.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, to try to tell people. And then it'll be like the first 10 people on the door.
Right.
Get a lunch or something, right?
Yeah, that's food always great for a lot of
I can open it.
These are new.
Hmm?
These are new.
No, they were just.
Yeah, that pretty much open. They were just up there.
Yeah. We were branding UCLA too much.
We were listening on the light bulb. When you look at the video, you see UCLA, USC. Right. It's not about you're evil.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to put this here so everybody clearly sees that we do feed people.
You're doing, you have the sign-up sheet and the,
Sign sheet, yes, and I'm going to make a schedule run for booking requests too. Yep. All right. I'm going to post the link to the thing on
yeah.
Okay. I wonder how that works. It'll just be.
Copy that.
All right.
All right. Have a good time.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So basically, we're going with it now. Are you graduating this year?
No, I got another
one more, right?
Yeah. No, I'm just actually starting my thesis, so staying out for the summer. Should be fun.
Cool.
Yep.
Awesome. Yep. You said you're in the business plan company.
I'm in both. Well, all three. Yeah.
I think I saw your paper amongst the list.
Yep. Yep.
There you go.
How many made it through the finals? Oh, okay. About 20 went through the concept paper. I think there's 16 left.
You mean business plan or deal?
Oh, business plan. But what about
I think we have like 15, 20 or something.
Oh,
State book. Like, really got to read all these things?
well, it's like 25% and something, right?
You got a good shot.
No, assuming that we keep it going.
All right. See you soon.
See ya.
I love photos at Marr. And see how many customers they have. And then photo 50. Okay? Yeah. Other ones. Yeah, I just want to be yeah, because that's not unlocked for me. I'm very grateful for you. There's a place that we get. We do it. Of the so there you go there if you want. I'm going to work on that. I'm working on the last thing. I'll talk about working on and I think that's like okay. Yeah, and I'll send you the soft copy.
I just realized that 12:30 is.
Yeah,
it's fine. So I'm just gonna let's do homework.
Yeah, I would. Both sides. I mean, if you're reading over time, it's a form operation. It's basically what I guess we correctly choose as an example of what you need to do. So basically, it's pretty much I would love for this group like isn't it easier? Like, yeah, it's realistic. That's what it is. Yeah, it's open source. Because I guess what happened was when they was doing this, a customer wanted to mention, do they have to say these scripted words? Like straight out, like, say everything. I'm hoping.
The conversion was so simple.
I mean, that was cool. Or, I don't know if
So like I would be one. It's colder outside though. Yeah. It's like windy. It's cold.
Just bring me back to summertime.
Very fresh.
Yeah, the first. I mean, you have the first one. A couple months and they'll be like, "Oh, stale." Yeah.
Yep.
Honestly, lovers person. Yeah. And it's a lot of policy. Much better. So I think a lot of her has a motivation. I don't think that we could go to that. I think so. Because it was an agent that thing that we're looking open. We're either looking outside the company, we're going to transfer out. So she might. I'm not a good friend as well. It's like, why don't you work under me? Yeah, that's true. You know, I'm like, and she worked with the technology before, so she knows at least yeah, I want, as an example, I'm going to this thing. I want to experience that this. And it's like, I want to, they know who's good sound. Basically, they come back from themselves. I have to use and I already talked about it. Like, I'll only talk about it, but I keep it slow because I don't want oh yeah. And that's why I told others I'm like, hey, guys, you know, it's in the air, nothing's crazy, nothing's wrong. It doesn't think about that. Yeah. You have to, see that you want. Yeah, that's what yeah. Two times I met her, really like, she was like, she's scared to like, positive, she's bilingual with words. Yeah.
Yes, it's not. Well, for all credit card customers, they need us to verify their ID. You wait for 31 cents on your card.
Hello? Hello, this is Ryan. Say again, I'm sorry. It's now you gotta walk out to where I get good reception. Say that again. Yeah, what's going on, sir? Yes. Sure, so when you send somebody an email for the first time, just be cognizant of what you're using as the subject line. Make it very relevant. A lot of times if it's the first one, you're adding it like a question. Or saying what works for me is 2 things or 3 things or 1 quick thing. Something that makes them feel comfortable and click and actually go, right? And if they don't respond to that, then you take that same email and you reply, and then you put in the subject line, checking in, and then have it be the same at the same time. Whatever it is. The 3rd time, and only use this on the 3rd time, in the subject line, put 3rd request, colon, and then what the normal subject line is. And 9 out of 10 times they'll pop you back, or they'll read it, and they'll figure out what's going on. And just make sure that in the email you have no actionable items. Try to not have more than 3 things, and make one of the 3 things actually asking them to do something. So the 3 things would be, hey, I'm following up because of our conversation the other week. Number 2 is I really thought about what you said and it was great. Number 3 is I wanted to specifically ask you if I can do what? You know what I mean? So just 3 main things, even when one's a greeting and one's a follow-up, a call to action. So the shorter that first email is, the better. and then using the subject line, saying third request, is a nice passive-aggressive way to get their attention. Yeah, no, just in the subject line, put third request, the number 3 RD, and then request, and keep the request lowercase with a colon, and then the same subject line that you had before. Right. Yeah, so totally. So I would think a good subject line would be, please confirm receipt, or confirming you received my info, or something like that. Some sort of action item at the top, and then that sets you up for the number 2 and then the number 3. Cool. All right, no worries. All right, talk to you soon. How you doing?
Oh, hi.
Hey, are you here for the Lunchtime LaunchPad?
Yes.
Okay. Well, come on in. Let me get you this, which is our sign up form, fresh off the press, and then you can sign in for that there. And then when you're done, hand it to this gentleman here, introduce yourself, and then we've got our who's coming. Hey, you're good. Welcome. So every Monday and every Thursday, we have guest speakers. So we have guest speakers come at 12:30 today.
Oh.
Yeah, it's everything.
Okay, so if you signed up, we will send you a reminder email every Monday on the guests that we have every week.
Yeah.
So it's just a single email each week.
All this stuff is coming back in our next week. So
No, I know.
And then we're
yeah, I'm like,
I know.
I feel like I need to say no to things that are like,
I
it's
didn't
hard.
know that was hard, right?
But you're welcome to stay with us if you want. Why don't you fill this out for me?
I was working because I'm trying to put like all of your
Sure, we'll fill that out for you.
Okay,
Right.
but he wants it
Right,
time, so
right.
it's kind of like,
It's easy to take time out for other things that
yeah, it's with me.
can't necessarily take time out. You feel like you're not able to dedicate all the time, so you're always going to miss things.
I know. What can you do, right?
Right.
You can do a lot of stuff. You can always do a lot of stuff.
As long as you keep learning, getting better at it.
Yeah. I know.
So I guess it's like, I like actually being set. There's too much to do because that's how I know I'm doing as much as I can.
No, that makes sense.
So it's like if you have, just things should take as long as you have what it would take. So,
Pareto's law, buddy.
right, exactly.
Maria, do you know about Pareto's law?
Yeah, totally.
It's amazing.
But sometimes we still get caught up in
But the
it.
truth is you still have to say you can't do it all, but you don't,
That's
like the other
true,
side
that's
is you
true.
can't get over
Oh, yeah.
can't get over it too.
We just have
Yeah,
to set priorities.
It's a challenge, but it's
It's a good skill to have. Practice. You have to practice it forever.
all right. Great, thank you. All right, we'll be in touch.
I was thinking about this like today, like how does the president like manage his time? You know, because yeah, because he was like, I mean, he has to like he's coming here, right? For his I think I guess he just went to some catastrophe in the Midwest.
Oh,
I heard about on the news, so it's like how does and they're like they're doing the whole news thing. It's like something's transcend politics. It's like no. Everything is politics at that level. Like you can't get away from it. It's just but anyways, it's like somebody prioritized that. It's something they had to do.
then
It's just crazy. Like how does he? You know, it's like
yeah,
no, I know, right? Absolutely, he does, but he still has to make the final decision. If he does,
No, that's true.
he's not gonna because he's got to be
He can't do everything.
so he's got to like.
Yeah.
He's not controlling his time. He's really in charge.
No, that's true.
But it's like, but then how do you like balance going to see someone who wants to, versus like trying to protect the U.S. from Russia or Iran or whatever, like the sanctions that they're doing over there.
Yeah, but you can do I don't think it is. I mean,
Well, but I'm just saying like the different things. But you have to make a decision about whether it's important to pay attention to that or not. So how you pay it, yeah. Whether it's important or not. Yeah,
or like
it's like the decision.
I see people from there.
I mean, it's like how do you balance the priorities?
And the large scale.
Like this down deep personal thing versus like a national security thing you just got.
Some levels you kind of go into it. You know what I mean? Like the more responsibilities you take, and then you just
He has to use the authority of his position.
exactly.
Just give advice. More but then like trying to control, I can kind of
You're like
I know. Well, it's because there's got to be. I mean, everyone's trying to take power from you.
it's horrible.
It's
All the
exactly
time, yeah.
So it's like you can't really trust anybody.
No, I get it. I mean, it's a human business, right?
It's business.
Yeah,
But like the head of a big company. So
exactly.
same kind of thing.
It's how,
Right.
yeah. I think you're aware of that too. I think it's like just trusting at some level. Just
Yeah.
just jump over the cliff and just go for it.
It's like here's trust the person around you. It's good enough.
Yeah, I mean, how big is it because that's why you're working with people at the table.
Yeah. Like so we have.
You have that Spanish there. It's the most of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
6 months of market. Kind of big, but it's just because everyone has different experiences.
Yeah.
A lot of people are there.
You never know, right?
Yeah, and everyone's splitting their time. Having we have like computer science, electrical, design, systems.
What do you do? I mean,
I'm like the leader, I guess. Like most of the business stuff. We don't have
just going to study maybe.
Oh yeah. So I'm like. So they did like an undergrad like coordinated for pros, so I guess that.
Like I registered.
Yeah.
It's so hard sometimes to coordinate.
It is.
Like that's the crazy thing. And to keep them motivated.
Yeah, trying to like organize them and get them. Yeah.
Totally.
Have something that they can feel excited to work on.
Yes. No, I mean, like the end goal, because it's not like, I mean, it's nothing real so far, but you just selling
Yeah.
the idea.
Well, yeah, we're building a prototype.
Yeah, I know.
Oh, yeah. But yeah, right.
But
It's not really.
like I tell you, no, I know that's kind of like, it's interesting too. I know you notice that, but when you bring someone onto the team, and then, like, I notice sometimes that they have maybe different team players, and then, like, when they're one-on-one really good, and they like to talk, but then when the teams are
Oh, yeah.
And then you figure things out as you go.
Yeah, so it's a combination of like trying to encourage a free and non-judgmental sort of thinking environment where they all, like, because they'll say something like, "Oh, I don't know if this is a problem." It's like, that's actually really important that we get that out.
Yeah.
So it's I don't want people to feel intimidated. There's a huge spread of colleges, like undergrads, second year undergrads, and then grad students. So yeah, which is fine. Like I'm not expecting, like on the software, I'm not expecting this amazing or like, so it's just a prototype.
No, sure, it doesn't have to be perfect.
That being said, though, it would be nice to have a grad student do something.
So you don't have one so far?
No, we don't.
I'm working.
So we have people.
Oh no, I know it would be very hard to come by.
Yeah, so we have because they can do really good jobs, but
No,
without a grad degree. But
are you reading up on it? Like, because you're doing the app, right? Exactly. So are you like coding it as well?
no, I'd have to crash course my way through Android.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I'm doing all this other stuff. I'm kind of just
No.
get my hands off of coding and just kind of let it do undergrad. Because they actually have, they're doing Apple. Yeah, they have a little bit of experience doing it. So.
I feel like that's sometimes wrong, like, because I like to understand the process, and especially when you give someone just like, okay, you just kind of have no idea what you're talking about.
Right, like I can. Yeah, that's where I've been trying to, because one of the advantages, like I worked for a couple years in an environment where I was doing thermal systems design. So a lot of the meetings that we got into, I was dealing with our people, like communication people, that design a communication system.
Right.
And so I had to do a lot. There's a lot of meetings where you're kind of doing a cross-discipline balance. Mostly what it was thermal dislocation.
Right.
So it was like they have inefficiency in their system that causes my system to be heat. For them, they want to assume like conservative. They want to assume that they have more heat than they actually do, because it's like. But anyway, like our assumptions were in direct conflict with each other, and so like there's always this sort of balance where you try and kind of understand what they're doing. So I'm doing that, like, yeah. So like actually, I think. So I try to do some meetings where we just like build a kind of block diagram of the process and like try and dive.
Like a wireframe. A wireframe.
Block diagram. Yeah. What is your background?
International studies.
Oh.
Yeah. I just wanted to do diploma.
Yeah.
And then I got my practice entrepreneurship.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like it's very similar. It's like
I'm not so sure about like maybe working for the government.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And
No,
I really like entrepreneurship because it's more, I don't know, I feel like it can be more creative.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, I mean, your possibility space.
Yeah, there you go. Right? No, for sure. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely difficult for them. And I have a lot of questions actually for total managers that have asked how they manage it, because somewhat they have to trust their employees to do that work correctly.
Exactly.
But they have to have, at the same time, they're responsible for their training.
Exactly.
So there's a balance between their confidence that someone has it under control, which is always a guess, and like their understanding of the process. You can't do it yourself. You can't do it all yourself.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, that's one of the things that nervous the last couple of weeks. Well, it's because like, I haven't really worked with a lot of these people for very long, and so we have. I'm not really well. It's it's a competition. So at least like I'm not trying to build
So you
something.
think you're running a competition?
Yeah. We actually have to do it. We're doing prototypes. So that's nice because
Yeah, that's
I'm
really
kind of flexible in like what we actually build, but I am trying to push them to give that function and work prototype because that's how we're going to win something.
exactly.
And it seems like we're having a pretty good part together, but it's because we'll see.
Okay. And what competition are you doing the business plan?
Doing the business plan.
Oh, okay.
So what I decided to do is saying, okay, we want to have a prototype by business plan.
Mm-hmm.
Even though it's not as important as the business plan, but I want it there so that it's better.
Exactly.
So it would help.
It's all oriented, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we could deal with that one. But so basically, in my mind, I'm thinking we don't have something worth showing.
Yeah.
We can show drawings and stuff. But that'd be okay. It'd be good part of the business plan. But I'm not going to tell them that. So I'm hoping that they'll catalyze. And then if we don't have something, it's just easier if you have a deadline.
How did it work together? Your team?
Actually, it's fun.
Ryan is called?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, I was on silent. Good to meet you.
I mean, too. Sorry I'm late.
Oh,
I
no,
had to
it's-
circle the whole parking deck 3
Oh
times.
my gosh.
I guess there's some event, and so they had a part of it blocked off.
Well, appreciate you for taking that effort. Go ahead and have a seat. We've got some water there for you, licorice if you need to. We'll give a couple more minutes if we have a few other people, and then we'll keep going on it. Okay, great.
Oh, we're just.
And we're going to be videotaping if that's okay with you. All right.
So that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, I think our prototype. That's the hard part for me. I don't want to do the prototype myself. I have to let them do it.
You do it to the Android method or what? The Android?
Well, yeah, I want to do it for Android eventually, but we're going to do the prototype on Apple.
Really?
I'm actually a little bit kind of somewhat regretting that I let them go ahead and do Apple, but
Yeah.
just because I know nothing about the Apple.
Oh, okay.
But Android, I think
That's
So
what I'm
he's on.
planning in the summer.
Well, you got some good stuff there?
It's just, this is a presentation I did for the group of small business owners.
Great. Well, you're good. We have
On the same topic.
we have the before small business owners. We have student business owners. Welcome. All right. I knew you were showing up, so we wait a second.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you.
Then here's kind of the signed-in sheet if you guys have a second along the way.
This is like the whole 2 weeks left. So we're just in a meeting, you know, get everyone talk about it.
It's funny to see the old school clipboard and then tablet board, right? Just crazy difference. All right. All right. Well, if you guys want to just scoot in, we will get organized.
Let's go back to my gym so nobody wants to sit too close to me. I want to be very open about that.
Yeah, I have to
Good,
do
we'll sit
the
over there.
support.
Hey, Jim's good. Okay, well, welcome. I think this is great. This is a nice intimate group, and these 3 individuals specifically, they are on the topic of trying to figure out what's going on with business formation. So it's great to be able to have this one-on-one interaction with them. I'd like to start to go around the room and just have everybody introduce yourself and what your kind of business is and what you're looking to get out of it, and then we will let conversation / discussion / interview be really led by where it goes. That sounds good. Well, you want to start, and then we'll.
Okay.
Yeah, you get to start again.
Okay, cool. So my name is Camilla, and so I'm currently like the founder of a startup team. I like a fashion and lifestyle magazine, but we're creating an app right now, and we want to pretty much show people help figure out what's their social image. So we're doing like a fusion between Instagram and Live. And so because we already have team members and we have partners, I'm trying to figure out pretty much how to set up the business and like how we're going to do that to connect the idea as well, but also the creations of the individual people that work within the team. So that's one of the things.
All right. And Michael, you can go first, right?
Yeah. So I'm a master's student here at Marr. We're in 3 competitions here. Actually, first one next week. And we have a team of like 6 people. things I guess I'm not certain about is like when is it actually appropriate to start to form the getting designs that kind of have a first and finished apply application. So it's like we do have an agreement with the group to not use it like for anything else in the project. So
Right.
Yeah. So I am currently heading a team that we're working on like a software service type of internet app, I guess. Two components. So there's the obviously web service type service, I guess is the best way of saying it. And then we're going to be building an application on top of that for mobile devices. Its main focus right now is going to be image sharing. So that's kind of where we're at. We've begun looking at kind of users' rights and our rights as far as image. Who actually owns the images, what our fair uses are, whatnot. And more importantly, like we're in a similar boat, we're starting to look at, should we be looking at an LLC or, moving towards incorporating. We have spoken with several investors at this point, and that was one of the major things is they just didn't want to talk to us if we didn't have an actual, someone that they could think about or consider even contributing to. But yeah, so right now we're kind of working over our pitch, continuing to develop the service and product, and then, like I said, right now we're really looking towards what the next steps are for us as far as forming and moving forward.
I'm Rich Marr. I'm a corporate transactional attorney with Retainer Tucker. We're the largest full-service law firm in Orange County. Been there for over 100 years. We've got about 150 attorneys in the firm. Most of my practice, I'd say about 75%, focuses on helping people buy and sell businesses. Then the other quarter is general corporate counsel for ongoing businesses, whatever comes up. Whether it's drafting agreements or general corporate governance, formation of entities, shutting down entities.
Great. I think today is a great opportunity to explore some of these questions you guys are having, which is, when do I start? What do I start with? How do I start? And on the M&A side, you probably find a lot of businesses that are formed that wish they could have had this type of conversation before they started. So with that, maybe you can start us off on where to start, and then we can go based on questions so we get someone to take the question.
Okay. So in general, I would say you can't consult a lawyer too early, and you generally can't form an entity too early if you're, especially given what you told me where you've already started things that sort of giving you the general lay of the land. There are 4 basic types of entities that you might use in businesses such as yours. One is a sole proprietorship. If you didn't have any partners, it sounds like you all did. And that's done without filing any paperwork with the state. You just file with the county a fictitious business name filing. As you would be personally liable for all operations of the business in that form. And that just happens by virtue of doing business stuff.
It's the default. It's the default.
Default, well, if it's one person. Okay. So if you have partners, as you do, you already have formed a general partnership because you are working with others for profit. That's all that has to happen in order to form a general partnership. You can register a general partnership with the state, but you don't have to. But regardless, the general partnership is not a limited liability entity, so you are exposing your personal worth to the liability to the rest of the world if you haven't formed it. Then the 2 registered entities you would be most likely deal with are either an LLC, one or two you mentioned, or a corporation. And specifically, and this is very important, an S corporation, not a C corporation. So an S corporation means that after you form the corporation, you make an S election with the IRS, so that you treat the corporation as what's called a pass-through entity. which means you won't pay 2 levels of tax. A C corporation, you'll have to pay tax on the corporate profits, and then you'll have to pay tax again when their distributions out to the shareholder. An S corporation eliminates those 2 layers, and just when you pay a tax on the profits, and you don't pay taxes on the distribution. And the biggest mistake that I see people make with forming entities is to form a C corp and not make an S selection. Then when you come to see me to sell your business, you're very disgruntled when I tell you how much your taxes are going to be on that transaction. It's going to be very bad. And there's no quick fix. You have to have that selection in place for either 5 or 10 years. They keep changing the law. Right now it's 5, it's going back to 10 this year. So you would want to make an S selection. Now, I generally recommend using an LLC unless there's some tax reason that an S corporation could be more beneficial, because LLCs are much more flexible than a corporation. Corporations are governed entirely by statute. You can overlay some agreements, but you can't override the corporate statutes. LLCs can, primarily an entity or contract, and there are just a few statutes that you can't override, but for the most part, you can do whatever you want with an LLC. So really, to me, the only reason to form a corporation for a startup is either, like I said, there's a tax benefit to doing an S corporation, or if there really is a true likelihood in the relatively near term of going public, which is not generally possible. And you can always convert to a C corp later, so it's not like you've made some fatal mistake if you go with a different.
Isn't it also true that certain investors or venture capital firms, maybe you would know more about this, will only deal with corporations as opposed to LLCs?
No. Venture capitalists will definitely deal with LLCs. Frequently, they prefer a corporation and often a C corporation because foreign investors need to invest through a C corporation for tax purposes.
You're not hurting yourself by developing
Even if you form an LLC and then later you get to the point where you need to raise institutional money, you can always convert to a corporation if that's what they say.
But you can't go from a corporation back to an LLC.
You could, but an LLC is going to be much better in the near term because you have a lot more flexibility.
Gotcha. Can we touch for a second on the cost, time, process? Those 3 things when it comes to start. So let's say, okay, we've narrowed it down. LLC seems to make the most sense. Where do you start? Obviously, you can have help with it, which might have more costs associated, which just we'd be curious to know. And then on the other is, can you do it by yourself? And the benefit analysis of one or the other.
Yeah, you certainly can do it by yourself. You form corporations and LLCs by just making a relatively simple filing with the Secretary of State. You could search on the web and find, and go to the Secretary of State website, and then they even provide forms for the basic formation documents. So you could do that, but I would not recommend doing that without consulting an attorney, because those forms are very, very basic and are not going to help you think through what you need to address for your business. It's fine when you aren't yet really doing anything, you're just trying to get things set up and have the corporation. But if you're going to, and if it's just you, that can be okay. But if you have partners, I really recommend you talk to an attorney that helps guide you through the process. So costs are relatively low. It'd be under $1,000 to form a corporation or an LLC. Costs are pretty similar. Filing fees are about the same. Even going through a law firm, it'll only cost roughly $1,000 to just get an entity formed. When you have partners, where you'll spend time, an LLC is the operating agreement, corporation would be a shareholder agreement, and that may be vanilla, where there's not a lot of lawyer time required. It all depends on the complexity of the arrangement with your partner, on how much time and money you'll have to spend on that. Generally, I don't see a lot of time having to be spent on it. Usually, here's what a standard agreement looks like. Explain all the provisions. Just based on a high-level overview of the business and the relationship among the partners. I'll recommend some provisions. That's usually it. So it's just a couple hours of my time.
They usually do like one process.
Yeah, so in if you do the operating agreement or shareholder agreement, put restrictions on transfer, so you'll get partners who can plan on having to buy a little bit with partners selling it. I highly recommend you think about how you're going to buy partner out. It's not going well with that person. To have a well defined process for that, because otherwise you're going to have to go to court. And then you also address what if somebody has lined someone up and they want to sell. What rights do you have? You typically have a right of first refusal in order to buy their shares, the company to buy their shares, as well as the right to join in the sale on the same terms. And you might also include a drag-along right, so that you have 5 partners and 3 have agreed that if they want to sell to a proposed buyer, that they can force the other 2 to go along.
What about taxes? Like California state taxes for like the LLC corporation? How much are they?
Yeah, so there's an annual franchise tax for both of $800, and then other taxes are $800.
So on that note, no matter whether you sell a product or just open an entity, every year after you open that business, you are having $800 liability. Right. And now, maybe we can segue onto the topic of where to form your LLC. I know there's talk about Delaware, there's talk about Nevada, people have different advantages and disadvantages, but a big misconception I always hear is, well, I'm going to form my corporation in Delaware so I can avoid that $800. But if I'm not mistaken, if you're doing business in California, it doesn't matter. You can be in Delaware, you can be anything there. So that's a big misconception. And as a startup, how do you judge that value? I don't have my first dollar in, but I need to protect myself, but I'm looking at $800 a year for that protection.
So first of all, I'll address the Nevada and Delaware issue. So if you're doing business here in California, even if you form a Nevada entity or a Delaware entity, you're going to have to qualify to conduct business in California.
Who's doing business?
If you're here and doing your business here, all your partners are here and whatever's happening is happening here, you're doing your business in California and you're going to have to qualify. So you'll be paying that $800 fee as well as the fees you have to pay in Delaware or Nevada. So I often have clients come to me and say, I want to form a Nevada LLC. I want to save the taxes. Not true. Big misconception. Because Nevada doesn't have state income tax. By forming Nevada LLC, if you're doing business in California, you're still going to be subject to California taxes. So you won't get that benefit. Like I said, you'll be paying fees both. Actually, the fees in California are less than Nevada. So don't be misled about those 2 jurisdictions. Delaware, the reason people frequently form entities there is they have the most fully developed case law on corporate law. However, even if you are a California entity, if there's a unique issue that's only been addressed by Delaware, California generally follow that. So there's not that much value in forming your entity in Delaware. It's most likely reason you would end up forming your entity in Delaware with an investor. Frequently, institutional investors will require the entity to be the LLC or likely a corporation.
And that's because the state regulations there are less stringent and they've been more tested out.
Yes, there's more case law, so they get more certainty of what you're supposed to get.
Now, for Nevada, also, isn't there a provision where if you're incorporated in Nevada, it's not public? There's certain pieces of the business information and ownership that's not public as an advantage as well for people to have entities but not necessarily have their names publicly associated with those entities?
Well, with either one, you can avoid your name being generally available by paying an agent for services process, which is the name that's published on the Secretary of State website. However, the Statement of Information in California does provide a bit more information than having to provide the names of the officers and directors. And that's not available online, but it is publicly available. And Nevada is less stringent.
We have a couple more guests. Let's just kind of introduce. So this is Goran over here. Goran, do you want to introduce yourself?
I work here at UCI on industry university relations. I also work with our alumni association. We have a group that's called the Chief Executive Roundtable that connects the leaders of mostly the large companies in the area, as well as law firms, bank presidents, and so on, with the campus leaders called the Chief Executive Roundtable.
Karen?
Hi, my name's Karen. I'm an undergrad here. I'm a public health science major. I'm a graduate student. And
Catherine.
this is my friend, Morgan.
I'm Morgan. I'm a student at Sutherland right now. Looking to transfer, and I own a piano teaching company right now.
Yeah, teaching. Very cool. Right.
We are actually an LLC in Delaware right now because of certain things that Delaware has.
Great. So we're talking about essentially business formation in general. So we've discussed the differences between Delaware, Nevada, and California, talking about how an LLC is a good place to start. Now, with you guys, do you have any specific questions of where your next step is, or anything based on what we're saying?
I want to ask this because this is a student competition, so a lot of people in my team are students. So there is some uncertainty with which might be a situation. So, like, basically, the turnover of people in the company might be higher. I don't know if that's something maybe you want to address to make sure that more people have actually having the same position. On the game,
Yeah, especially when you have a sweat equity entity, you really need to address what happens if someone stops working. I see it far too often. A good example would be franchisees. I represent a lot of McDonald's franchisees. And McDonald's requires that everyone who has an equity interest in the franchise owners to be actively involved in business. But that doesn't help the situation when an equity owner isn't contributing. There's no provision in the agreement that requires them to and addresses what happens if they don't. And so we run into litigation because the person wasn't working, but we didn't have a contractual right to force them out. So they were just free riding along. Because the franchisee was continuing to open new stores as well as running the business, all for the benefit of the person sitting back and collecting the money.
Is that an operating agreement piece then?
Yeah, so that's something that should be addressed in the operating agreement or shareholder agreement.
Is that where vesting shares become involved, where you have an agreement, an operating agreement that will share, here's what piece you get, but you only get these pieces if you reach certain benchmarks or certain time frames, so that you can have somebody with an inherently large value of equity, but they only receive it if they make it past the first year or past the second year.
Typically, vesting is something that would be done for someone who's just an employee who wanted to incentivize their equity. If it's an original founder, what you would typically issue some sort of restricted equity, such that if they stop working at any time, you have a right to buy out their interest at a specified value. Which the specified value doesn't necessarily need to be a number. It could be that you're going to have the value of the entity appraised and pay that value. Sometimes there are other means of doing it, such as making an offer to the other person, and they get to either accept that offer or buy your interest on the same term. Depends on how many founders you have, on what mechanism works best. But you wouldn't typically have this.
Maybe we can speak a little bit towards IP, because that's a concern usually, where you've got this product or an app or a widget or fashion things that you need. How does IP and protection work within the corporations? And are there any things to look out for, including patents or not, intellectual property? How do those tie in with assets of the corporation?
So, I'm not an IP attorney, so I'm not the one. I believe you had
we had somebody on Monday.
I assume they addressed, what steps you have to take in order
so
to
let's
register your.
let's assume that we've got the IP. Yeah. Maybe talking about the value of having an entity to protect that IP or to how that connects.
So somewhat similar to corporations, you have the registered and unregistered IP. And in your situation with lots of partners, it's quite likely that you have unregistered IP that has been developed by one or many other partners. It's critical that you have a written agreement that specifies that all is owned by your company. Whether right now, if you're operating as a general partnership, you need to have it owned by the general partnership. If you form an LLC, you need to have an LLC. Same for corporations. That's the mistake I most commonly see, where all the intellectual property rights aren't put into the entity, and so they end up being held by the individuals. And then later you need assignments, and maybe some of those individuals have moved on, or you're not friendly with them anymore, and they hold it over your head and end up with
What about time frame? Let me touch base on that real quick. There's this startup bootstrap mentality where I'm going to go almost as long as I can without an entity, and maybe we start to have investment meetings, or you get closer with wanting to file provisional patent protect. If you were to say, okay, I need a business now, how long does that take for it to get to a spot where an investor would be satisfied with it being an entity? Is there a time frame to expect?
Oh, you can form an entity overnight. Okay, 24 hours at a minimum. You have to pay extra to have all the paperwork back within 24 hours. It can be done in 24 hours. And if you had to, you could get the shareholder agreement or operating agreement done. Not much more time than that. So that doesn't take a lot of time. In terms of when you should really think about forming an entity, it's when you really are going to be exposed to potential liability. So if you're free revenue and not really interacting yet with the general public, it's fine to just have a partnership. Ideally, you would get a written agreement amongst the partners that addresses things like assignment of intellectual property, what you're going to do in the future, maybe even when you're going to take the next step and form a registered entity.
Is there a certain form for that, or is that something that 4 people in a group can get together and say, guys, let's talk about these issues, and maybe what are those main issues? The split, the timing, what that plan is, because it's all about the chicken or the egg, which one came first. But that sounds interesting. Some of these preliminary documents you can form that a student group can put together to make sure everybody's on the same page, before actually incorporating, and those documents would be a good starting point for helping what determines operating.
Yeah, you could find a form of partnership agreement on the internet that's course, I'm happy to help. I provide pro bono services to a lot of small business owners. I'd much rather help somebody for free than they make big mistakes at the early stages when it really wouldn't have taken much time in order to avoid this problem.
I think Karina will call you back when she has been bought out by a major fashion company.
So the major issues that you'll want to address in your sort of very basic partnership agreement, what you want to have, you have to agree upon the ownership, agree upon no transfers of interest to anyone else. All the intellectual property rights related to the business will be assigned by the partners into the partnership. It's not actually will be, that they are. That it's something that's already done. They don't need to sign something further where they grant the power of attorney to get those rights. And you want to address what happens if someone wants to.
So if somebody were to seek out an attorney, yourself or somebody else, for some sort of pro bono work to put together some of these agreements, it would be advantageous for the students to come up with all those things originally and then approach an attorney and say, hey, I know what I need. I've done the work and I've talked to my partners about those different issues. And bringing that to you, I'm assuming that would be an easier pro bono job because all that's there.
How really, you really just should have spoken with your partners about how you want the business to be run.
Okay.
The lawyer will be able to step you through all the components. And that really it's more what's special to your particular business that's of particular concern. Because everything else we're used to doing, it's no problem. It's more us explaining to the entrepreneur what should be in place. So we just need to know where they're divergent from customers.
So, say, does this actually sounds like setting up an operating agreement of some kind that I would like to do before next Friday? Where we win like 5,000 or so. With all the growth. But I'm thinking it might be premature for us to think about ownership factor. So we could do all of the other stuff and then just say like ownership will be determined. It's kind of more of an agreement of it's kind of a good faith thing, I guess. But it would be something you could still go sign up. It would be at least something like protect the price and everyone feels comfortable.
Yes, even if you have a verbal agreement, that's enforceable. It's just more difficult to enforce because you could have a piece that she says, and that's tough to enforce. So a signed writing is ideal because then you have evidence that this was the actual agreement party. If given your situation, I could see determining ownership. That there's no intention of distributing now any cash you get in. Right.
Moving this in a slightly different direction. So once we're formed, what are requirements as far as board of directors go or anything like that? Do we require a board of directors? Do they have to be, as far as that goes? Or
maintenance. How do you maintain this? And touching on the corporate shield, because that's very important, and there are things to do once you file.
Yeah. So on this issue, LLCs and corporations are very different. This is one place where an LLC provides you a lot of advantages because there are a lot less formalities. You can put in the same formalities into an LLC that a corporation requires, but you don't have to. So in a corporation, you have to have a board of directors. If you're a sole owner of the corporation, that can be just you. If you have 3 or more owners, you'll have to have at least 3 members of the board of directors. And the board of directors needs to meet on a regular basis as well, because you need to conduct shareholder meetings. Once you have one shareholder, you don't really need to meet with yourself, but you still should, in the minute book, on at least an annual basis, evidence of shareholder meeting and the board meeting, or in cases of yes, these things are done. As Ryan said, don't maintain a corporate formality, which are somewhat sensitive to the corporation. We will lose liability protection of their corporation. In a limited liability company, you can either be member managed or managed. So if you're member managed, the partner will have to agree by a majority to take any action the corporation is going to take. Things that in the corporation be approved by the board of directors. If you're manager managed, you could frequently there's just one manager, but there may be a board of managers, multiple people, so that there has to be boards of those managers to take action. But more frequently than not, I see just a single manager of an LLC. And there are no required meetings. You can never, ever have a meeting of the members or the manager in an LLC, and it's no problem. So you don't have to keep a corporate minute book with an LLC like you do with a corporation. I still advise my clients to do so that you're tightly managing your business, but it's not required. You can agree with the members on how you want to handle corporate governance.
And the reason for this corporate shield is essentially the reason why you have a business entity is for the limited liability protection. So if something goes wrong, it treats that entity as the person that's essentially standing in front of you taking the hit.
Right, so let's say your LLC is doing well and you're sitting on $2 million in assets, and you personally are sitting on $2 million in assets. All five partners are sitting on $2 million of assets individually. If you produce a product and there's a class action lawsuit on the product and it's a $20 million claim, if you were operating as a partnership, those claimants, if they're successful, would not only get the $2 million inside your partnership, they would be able to take the $2 million from each one of you individually, as well as have a judgment against you for the remaining $8 million. If you have an LLC or a corporation limiting liability, and be able to get the $2 million out of the corporation or LLC, shut it down, and they would not get the other 18.
Now, speaking to college students specifically, one of the advantages of starting a business in college, you really don't have that many assets. You don't have the house, you don't have major stock, you don't have these major things. So where is that judgment value where they really don't have too much that somebody can take from you? The phrase, you can't squeeze blood out of a turnip. How do students go about judging that with this protection of liability? And are there specific businesses, like an app business, is that less probable for a lawsuit than a food business or a fashion business or somebody breaking their finger on the piano? And yet, how much do we look at those different risk analysis as a student going, well, versus paying $800 a year and going through these things? I think that's a big struggle. It's like, I don't have much to lose, so where's the value of the protection? Obviously there is, but that's something that is very relevant for student startups.
Yeah, so you definitely should consider the nature of the business and what the potential liability is. Certainly some businesses are much more prone to large liabilities than others. What you have to consider, though, is that the way things are now could be very different, maybe even pretty quickly. And maybe your business gets up and running, and a year from now, you are sitting on significant assets, both personally and in the entity. Well, then, yeah, you could form a limited liability entity at that point. But if there's a suit and it ties back to that pre-registration time, you're going to be personally on the hook. So I know it's nice to think, hey, I'm judgment-proof right now, but you're doing this so that you are not judgment-proof. So $800 is a relatively small amount to pay each year if you're really serious about the business and think you're going to spend
right.
Then corner classes. So.
Now, could you speak real quick to a nonprofit, and you have experience with that? because we have some businesses that are for-profit and then non-profit. And are you still having an LLC that is non-profit or an LLC that is for-profit, or it's a completely different piece?
You would form a nonprofit corporation. There are not LLCs for nonprofit, and it's somewhat similar to a for-profit corporation, but as you can imagine, there are a lot of specific statutory requirements that
Takes a
much
longer time as well,
that a
right?
nonprofit has to adhere to, and if they want to be something, you probably heard the term 501c3. That's a provision in the tax code that enables you to get tax-free donations. Then there's more paperwork to be completed, more requirements to adhere to. So for the most part, day to day, it's not really any different than a for-profit corporation. They're just a few more.
We've got a few minutes left. Any questions?
So I guess I understand the taxation side of it. So like for an LLC, how does it work as a pass-through, I guess? But when it's starting to get revenue to pay the owners, is that like a salary, and then you pay taxes on that, or you just pay taxes on the revenue of the LLC?
I sometimes see members of an LLC or shareholders in an S corporation being paid a salary. Of course, any salary you get, that's ordinary. But often not, especially early stage. And then the tax for pass-through entities, each member will, or shareholder will be allocated their pro rata portion of the profits and have to pay taxes on that, or be able to take a loss on the prorated losses, which are often in the near term. Of course, you don't have any thing to set off the losses against. They're not a tremendous value, but they could be in the future when you do have profits allocated.
And by incorporating, you then trigger the ability to write off a lot of what you're doing in your daily life, whether it's your car, or your business, or your laptop, if you're using these things. So when you're looking at your finances, it would be good to talk with a tax attorney, because that $800 that you're spending could save you well more than $800 if you're, say, working at a regular job and doing your business on the side. Again, it's a nice way to separate. And for freelancing and consulting, and this is another thing that we had talked about, where there could be an advantage for, say, you as an individual to start a corporation for your consulting that protects you, and then there would be an ability to bring in sort of members of a team that would be under that you might be positioned above.
Right.
That kind of a dynamic, right?
Although you said tax attorney, I wouldn't recommend going to a tax attorney. That's going to cost you a lot more than you need to spend.
Okay.
If you want to go to an accountant.
Accountant. Good. Okay, I learned that.
I have a question, since you mentioned nonprofit. Why is it that some people choose to own a nonprofit business as opposed to having a regular business with a nonprofit component to it, like Tom's? Why do some people choose to have a nonprofit? Is it mostly just for the cause, or is there some legal aspect to it?
So I don't deal a lot with nonprofits. Typically, the reason nonprofits are set up, the ones that I've dealt with, are to get the 501c3 treatment on donate. So that's a provision under the Internal Revenue Code that enables any person making a donation to the nonprofit corporation to deduct that from their taxes. If they don't file and get that 501c3, then your donation is just a donation. You're just giving the money away with no tax benefit.
So sometimes nonprofits are probably more profitable than regular business.
No, a nonprofit is limited in its ability to retain cash. They have to put it to use under specified time periods and can only retain so much.
You can have salaries and things for running the nonprofit and stuff, but ultimately you can't be just spending it all on, it has to be associated with some cause that's non-profit, type of a cause. And ultimately you run the nonprofit, but you can't sell the nonprofit, if you will. You can't monetize, right? So You can't have investors. You can have donors. So the difference is that you are, donating, as pointed out, and it's a tax. It can be if you have a 501c3, and there's also 501c6, different type of nonprofits. But if you have a 501c3, then an individual can make a donation and can write it off of your taxes. So that's the advantage. So usually nonprofits have some kind of cause, and they have some kind of donors that they're looking forward to, whether that's foundations or individuals that can give money to the nonprofit, and then basically it expenses things, it hires people, and so on. But you will not be able to sell that nonprofit. You can't, have investors.
UCI is a nonprofit.
UCI is a nonprofit.
So if somebody donates to the school, they get a tax write-off. It's an advantage for them, and then the school just continues to reinvest in the school.
The difference between UCI as a nonprofit versus a private university, which they call full profit. Well, there are also there could be private universities that are nonprofits, and there are private universities that are full profit universities.
So did we all learn a little bit today?
Not the Delaware. So do you have let's say if you actually do have a business in Delaware and you live in Delaware and all that, and let's say you want to either franchise or just have like another location in California. Do you need to get an LLC in California, or do you just do you have to get another one?
You don't have to form another entity. You will have to qualify your Delaware LLC in California and pay California franchise tax.
Okay. Okay. Even if you're just in California, so let's say if you use a company that allows you to form an LLC in Delaware. You paid, I guess.
So hypothetically, does somebody that you know set up a corporation in Delaware that has a registered agent in Delaware, so it seems like you're operating in Delaware?
Right, but they're actually in California.
Right. So you'll still be held. We talked about this, I think, before you came in, where you have where you have an $800 tax, franchise tax for doing business in California.
Okay.
And somebody asked, well, how do you qualify doing business in California if you're anywhere in or you're transacting in California, playing piano here, then it's transacting.
Piano is a little, that's why, because, there are people that telecommute and do business, even, so that's why I wonder, how does doing business qualify? Because, you could, there's a conference.
There are statutes that say when you have to qualify. Generally, what I tell people is, if you have an office in California, you need to qualify in California. Not if you have an employee working remotely. You have an office.
I know that goes back to the question on how do you define an office? Is that just like a place where you're?
No, I'm talking about a physical office.
Okay. So, the piano might go door to door, right?
Right. If it's not like an actual office, so if we only teach in the homes of other people, and our office is on our phone driving, it's.
But if you're teaching in homes and only in California, you need to qualify.
But businesses can often run at a loss for 2-3 years in that initial stages as you're building, so that can help to offset that $800, depending on
Nope, $800 you pay.
I'm saying from the standpoint of you're paying that $800, but the fact that you have this entity, you might be able to use the tax advantages of having a business. You're driving in the car, so that's a tax write-off. You're using your phone, but that's a tax write-off. So you might be able to offset. Yes, you still have to pay, and if you don't pay, they will come after you until you pay, and then they will tax you. So every guest, I like to ask if you had a book that just needs to burn a hole in somebody's pocket. Is there a certain book that you'd suggest for people to read, whether it's dealing with this or not, just to kind of expand our reading base? Or if you were on an island and you could only take one book.
Yeah, I don't think there's, lawyers read different books than laymen would read, so I don't think I could point you to the right book.
Okay.
I would point you to treatises that are far more detailed. What I would say is, please just go see a lawyer when you start doing this stuff, because the books will not help you very much do the right thing.
As long as we're on that topic, then are there a lot of lawyers that do pro bono work for startups at that stage, or is it typically not something that's done? And if so, how do we find exactly? How do we find someone that's willing to?
There aren't a lot. I do a lot of pro bono work, and the people who get to me often say they've been looking for years for someone that will do this pro bono. So,
well, I'm going to take you lunch after
me,
this, so I'll see if I can line that up.
I'd be happy to help you guys, but no, you're not going to have an easy time finding a corporate lawyer to do work pro bono.
Yeah, they will want to usually have some kind of deferred payment.
As long as we're talking about payments, so how does that work? And maybe this isn't a you question, more you, but how does that work as far as what is liability if you have investors or deferred payments down the road and you end up not turning a profit and the corporation goes away? What
process of shutting it down, essentially?
Yeah, I mean, what responsibilities do we have?
It's a question. You form an entity, you raise $100 grand, and then you fall on your face and scratch your nose, and all of a sudden everything shuts down. Yeah. Then you start your next business.
So, I mean, are individual partners liable at that point, or what kind of process is that written into the investment agreement then, or?
As long as you form the limited liability entity, and there's no contractual provision for personal liability, you will not be personal.
And on the investment side, you want to make sure that it's disclosed accordingly, and there's laws within that, and making sure that they're accredited investors, somebody who aggregately makes a certain...
Yeah, we didn't really get into the process with investors. There are many laws you have to comply with when you bring in outside investors.
So maybe we'll bring you back for a whole investment lunchtime launchpad. How's that sound? Good. All right. Well, we're a little past our time, but I appreciate it. Give a little round of applause here. And also, I'd like to announce that this is our first successfully internet broadcast live Lunchtime LaunchPad.
Oh, wow. Cool.
So whether we had anyone seeing us or not, thank you for checking it out.
Wow.
And we have schools, specialty schools all the way from Tokyo that are trying to find out what we're doing, and so that's the idea. So we do have a YouTube channel that you can subscribe to, and then if you can't make one of these, you can be not in class, but watch it on your phone or whatever else. So we're pretty excited.
What's the YouTube?
It's, you'll have to go to, what is ours? It's youtube.com/Antrepreneur, I believe. And so, yeah, but that's a big feat for us, so we're excited, and now your intellect and insight's going to be broadcast to a lot of people around the world.
Cool. So every part where he says he's happy to help, you know.
Yeah, we'll edit that.
Putting that online is probably.
All right, great. So again, thank you so much. And if we could do a little quick picture, I'll take a picture and you guys come over here and we'll get the Zots going on and spread some school pride throughout the world. You know about the Zot?
I have no idea what you're talking about.
So we're the anteaters. That's our, okay? So there's a funny story of how that happened, but our mascot hand signals like this. And it was based off of, the anteater was based off the comic by BC. And every time that the anteater would attack an ant in the comic strip, it would go, Zot! And that would be the onomatopoeia of how an anteater attacks an ant.
Grabs an ant and pulls it in.
And so if you see some of the different, actually, right here, look at this. Here. So see, when this is the anteater character from the whole comic, and when he attacks an ant, he goes, Zot. So the war cry essentially is, Zot, Zot, Zot. But we won't have to do that, but we will make you put your anteater on as you come for a picture. There you go. And then it's not, you got to make sure to bring the thumb back to get that nose extension.
Sure.
All right, so gather that there real quick. I'll take a quick picture. And this will be your pre-incorporation photo, and then a year from now, you guys will be a post-incorporation photo.
Front or behind it?
Yeah, you're good right there, front and center. Ladies, we're going to see.
What do I think, Richard? You be.
Okay, sure. All right, there we go. All right, so get your. So like a rock star. First of all, like a rock star, and then just move the thumb back.
All right, ready? Okay. And all right, one more. There we go.
Cool.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and if you guys are interested, why don't you connect now and introduce yourselves, and maybe maybe get on the waiting list for his pro bono nests.
Right. Do you have a card or? I don't think I do. I'm all out of cards.
This has been a live broadcast brought to you by Blackstone LaunchPad. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.